There is no doubt that Lindsey Graham is one of the most well-known Republican senators in the United States. Graham has stayed relevant and important by being outspoken and often controversial, even though he has changed sides of many relationships. The real truth about Graham's personal life and his partners, on the other hand, doesn't get enough attention. But let's look into the South Carolina senator's past first, shall we? Lindsey Graham was born on July 9th, 1955, in a segregated part of South Carolina. Her life was hard and humble. As a child, he lived in the back room of their bar, the Sanitary Cafe, which was also a restaurant, with his parents, Millie and Florence James Graham, and his sister. He had to share a bathroom with people who worked at a nearby mill plant because of this. The family eventually moved to a nearby house and then to a trailer. Graham started working as a rack boy at the downstairs pool hall when he was 12 years old to help support his family financially. Growing up quickly was hard for Graham because he was the first child and had to live and work at the bar from a very young age. It did, however, put him in dangerous places too early in life. One of his jobs was to answer the phone for worried wives who were looking for their drunk husbands. Besides these duties, Graham saw firsthand how hard it was to live in segregation. Bar wouldn't let black people drink beer there, even though about 20% of Central's people are African American. He will never forget how this discrimination affected him when he was growing up. Graham didn't always get straight A's in high school. He only got a C in school, but that didn't stop him from having big dreams. He told his teacher one time that he wanted to be governor one day, which made all of his friends laugh out loud. Some people might have given up on Graham going to college after he graduated from Daniel High School and got only 800 out of 1,600 on the SAT. But Graham was motivated. He got into the University of South Carolina and will be the first person in his family to go to college. While Graham was at college, he got a very important call telling him to go home right away. When he got there, his mother was in bad shape because she had an advanced stage of Hodgkin's lymphoma. She was taken to the hospital right away, but she didn't make it. Not long after that, Graham got another sad call. His sister, who is 13, found their father dead in his bed after a huge heart attack. Graham became the formal guardian of his sister since both of his parents had died. The service let him keep studying at the University of South Carolina in Columbia so he could stay close to home and take care of her. Graham went right into active duty after graduating from the University of South Carolina School of Law. In 1982, he joined the U.S. Air Force as an attorney in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. He first worked as a defense lawyer in the Air Force and was then sent to Rhine-Main Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. He was in charge of the Air Force's defense in Europe from 1984 to 1988. During this time, he was on an episode of 60 Minutes defending an Air Force pilot who was accused of using marijuana. This showed that the Air Force's drug testing methods were not working properly. Graham went to Europe for a while and then came back to South Carolina. When he got out of the military in 1989, he went into private business as a lawyer. From 1988 to 1992, he was an assistant county attorney for Oconee County. From 1990 to 1994, he was the city attorney for Central. Graham joined the South Carolina Air National Guard in 1989 after leaving the Air Force. He stayed there until 1995 before moving to the United States. The Reserve Air Force. During the Gulf War in 1990 to 1991, he was called back to active duty as a judge advocate at McEntire Air National Guard Station in Eastover, South Carolina. There, he taught pilots about the rules of war before they left. In the U.S., Graham was promoted to colonel in 2004 after being raised to lieutenant colonel in 1998. Air Force Reserve. The event took place at the White House, and President George Bush was in charge. In the same year, Graham got into some trouble with the law. The lower court first said it was okay for Graham to be a military judge while also being a senator. In 2006, though, the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces said that wasn't right, and that he shouldn't have had both jobs at the same time. Graham served in Iraq as a reserve on active duty twice in 2007. The first time was in April, and the second time was for 2 weeks in August. Detainees and problems of the rule of law. He didn't stop there, though. During August 2009, when the Senate was not meeting, he went to Afghanistan to do more work. He was later given the job of senior teacher at the Judge Advocate General School, but he never started that job. Graham was given the Bronze Star in 2014 for his great work as an Air Force top legal advisor in Iraq and Afghanistan. From August 2009 to July 2014, he was in charge of making sure that military prisoners were held safely. Graham retired as a colonel from the Air Force in 2015. After more than 33 years of service, he had hit the age of retirement for his rank, which was 60. His military pay didn't come in while he was a congressman or senator because he was working for the federal government and wasn't qualified for one. Graham was making big steps in his political career, which he began in 1994, while he was also moving up in the Air Force. That year, Graham saw a great chance to make his youth dream of becoming a politician come true. He had once dreamed of being governor, but this was a big step in the right direction. It was at that time that Democratic U.S. Congressman Butler Derrick chose to step down after 20 years of serving South Carolina's 3rd Congressional District. When Graham saw his chance, he gave it his all. Graham worked hard during the campaign and got people's attention. He did this with a mix of determination and luck. A lot of people were interested in him because he was driven and had experience in the service. He jumped into the race to replace Derrick after getting support from Republican U.S. Senator Strom Thurmond. Bob Cantrell got 33% of the vote, and Ed Allgood got 15%. Graham won the Republican primary with 52% of the vote. Democrats' James Bryant, Jr., a state senator, ran against Graham in the general election. The election was clearly won by Graham, who got 60% of the vote to Bryant's 40%. Part of the bigger Republican revolution that year was this win. Since 1877, Graham is the first Republican to have served as a representative for the area. Deb Dorn, who came from a strong political family, ran against Graham in 1996. She was Butler Derrick's niece and the daughter of William Jennings, Brian Dorn, who was a congressman for a long time. Even though he was challenged, Graham won re-election with 60% of the vote, while Dorn only got 40%. After 2 years, in 1998, Graham didn't even have to work hard for his 3rd term. Not a single person ran against him, so he easily won. In 2000, Graham was back in politics and running against Democrat George Breitharp. Even though the race was close, Graham's popularity stayed high, and he won a comfortable 4th term with 68% of the vote, while Breitharp came in last with 30%. From 2002 to 2004, when the famous U.S. Lindsey Graham knew it was his time when Senator Strom Thurmond finally chose to step down. It wasn't a surprise that he easily won the Republican primary to fill Thurmond's seat. In the general election, though, the real fight was with Alex Sanders, who had been president of the College of Charleston and top judge of the South Carolina Court of Appeals. Sanders had a good list of skills, but Graham's effort never stopped. Graham won easily on Election Day, getting 600,010 votes to Sanders' 487,359, which is 54% of the vote to Sanders' 44%. In terms of history, this win was more than just a political one. South Carolina had not had a new U.S. senator since Fritz Hollings in 1966, when Graham took office. Things got interesting when Graham ran for a 2nd term in 2008. Buddy Witherspoon, who was on the National Executive Committee of the South Carolina Republican Party, ran against him in the primary. Though most people were shocked, he ended up winning by a large margin, with 186,398 votes to Witherspoon's 92,547, or 66.82% to 33.18%. Graham won all but one of South Carolina's 46 counties, making him almost unbeatable. It was a different story in the general election. Graham was running against pilot and engineer Bob Conley, who had won the Democratic ticket. Even though Conley had a great background, Graham's campaign was much stronger. Graham won easily with 1,076,534 votes to Conley's 790,621, giving him 57.53% of the vote on Election Day. Graham spent an amazing $6.6 million on his campaign, while Conley only spent $15,000. Graham had a great track record of winning races until 2014. But that year, he was seen as one of the most vulnerable Republican senators running for re-election. A primary challenge was likely to happen because he had low approval numbers and was known for working with and compromising with Democrats. Conservative activists, like the Tea Party movement, wanted to get rid of him. The head of the Club for Growth, Chris Chokla, even said that his group would support a primary challenger if a good candidate came forward. There were no real opponents, and most people thought Graham would win. This was mostly because he was good at moving around and being violent when he saw a threat. Graham made friends with people from the state's congressional delegation who might run against him and help them raise money and get the committee jobs they wanted. Another important thing he did was build a strong political machine called the Graham Machine. It had 6 regional offices across the state, thousands of paid and volunteer workers, and over 5,000 precinct captains. Graham raised an amazing amount of money for his campaign and put up a lot of good ads all over South Carolina. He worked hard to help his constituents and deal with local problems, which made him more appealing. Graham didn't try to please Tea Party followers instead. He talked to them straight on and said that the Republican Party needed to be more open to everyone. As the Republican primary got closer, all of his hard work finally started to pay off, and at the same time, his approval ratings went up a lot. When it was time for the election, he won with 178,833 votes, which was way more than his closest competitor, State Senator Lee Bright, who only got 48,904 votes, or 15.4%. Graham kept running for senator for the whole time, even though it caused a lot of trouble. At some point in 2014, he thought about running for president. After less than a year, he chose to follow through on his childhood dream and run for president again in 2016. The last time he ran for office, things were easier for him than this time. Because there were so many other Republican candidates, Lindsey's poll numbers were so low that you had to use a magnifying glass to see them. He had to deal with tough people like Donald Trump. His effort was a huge failure from the start, which is sad. He still shot at Trump every chance he got, though. For one thing, he didn't like how brash Trump was. Trump's shoot from the hip style of speech was very different from the more formal, well-thought-out style Graham was used to. He often used humor and sarcasm to make his point and show how ridiculous he thought Trump's policy ideas were, but sometimes he didn't hold back. He called Trump a jerk, a religious bigot, and even told him to go to hell. Trump always had a way to answer back, though. His phone number was even read out loud in a news conference one time. Soon after that, Graham took a look around and saw what was written on the wall. On December 21, 2015, he chose to quit his run for president. It's interesting that Graham's tune changed completely after Trump won the election. In March 2017, he met with Trump and things went surprisingly well. In fact, Graham liked Trump so much that he gave Trump his new phone number. Around October 2017, they were playing golf together more than once. Once, Graham said Trump was crazy and not fit to be president. Now he was singing a different tune, praising their first golf trip like they were old friends. In April 2018, Graham said in public that he would vote for Trump again in 2020. For someone who was one of Trump's harshest foes in the 2016 primaries, this was a huge change. Even after all the big news networks said that Joe Biden would win the 2020 presidential election, Graham still supported Trump. That was not the end of his partnership. He went to Trump's first primetime gathering for the 2024 campaign on January 28, 2023. He also went on Fox News with Sean Hannity and said again that he supported Trump. It was already said that Graham raised his sister Darlene after their parents died 15 months apart. That is, when Graham was 22 and she was 13, they didn't have any parents. One of the hardest things he had to go through was losing both parents and having to take care of his sister like a mom. Even though he loved Darlene very much, it was very hard for a 22-year-old to take on such a big burden. They became very close, though, because of this event. They were almost unable to be apart. So much so that, when he ran for president in 2015, Darlene said she wanted to go with him on the campaign trail a lot to show people his milder side. She wanted to be there to show how caring he is on a personal level, which is something the public might not always see. There's not much to learn about Lindsey Graham's love life. This claim made a lot of people angry on social media and brought up old rumors about Graham's personal life. People talked about how Graham was seen in gay bars and with people of the same gender. Graham has also made some smart investments, such as a 10,000 square foot office building in Seneca, South Carolina. In 2007, he paid $2.5 million for this house. Today, the house is worth about $4 million, which is a lot more than it was worth. A 254 square foot brick townhouse in Washington, D.C. is another property that stands out. He bought it in 1997 for $225,000. Along with his other land, this home's value has gone up a lot as well, and is thought to be worth about $800,000 right now. For when Graham is in the nation's capital and not at his home in Seneca, he lives in this townhouse. Being in a handy place makes it easy for him to balance his work as a lawmaker with a nice place to live.